Hey Peyton, nice to see you again on this beautiful day. And this time with a quote by Russell Brunson, where he states, Entrepreneurship is the most spiritual journey you'll ever go on, because every day it tests your faith, your patience, and your identity. So, how would you describe your own entrepreneurial journey and how coherent is it with the spiritual aspect which Brunson talks about?
Excited to talk about this. It's something I've thought about a lot, and I love the quote. The way that I personally would frame this is not that entrepreneurship makes it natural to be spiritually centered, quite the opposite. But in fact, entrepreneurship is really valuable for our spiritual growth, incredibly valuable for our spiritual growth, and can grow us spiritually in some ways that we may not be forced to grow if not for this challenge or a similar challenge. I'm sure of course, there are many other paths that can yield similar growths and other challenges people can go through, even personal, non-economic, that can yield similar sources of growth. But in my experience, entrepreneurship it pushes you past your limits. It pushes you past what you can do alone. It pushes you past what you can sustain alone, what you can bear alone, what you can experience if you're just in your small self cut off. And so it will bring you to the absolute depths of anger and fear and hell and frustration and just wallowing in your own mistakes and regrets and the errors that you inevitably make when you're making so many decisions in real time with skin in the game. It forces you to experience all kinds of human interactions, and you're inevitably going to be incredibly outnumbered too in all of this. If you're an entrepreneur that has many employees, there will be many of them and only one of you, and you will have many vendors, many customers, many third parties. And so there's an experience of being besieged by the universe that oftentimes we pass through as entrepreneurs and must learn to access a capacity that is greater than that which we can bring to the situation alone. Or in other words, we will be sort of compressed and pushed on from many sides, and we are over and over again brought into a state of intense contraction where we are limited until we almost break and then break through into expansion, if we do, to the extent that we do. And so, on one hand, entrepreneurship is just this insane sea of temptations that bring us further from spiritual guidance, further from the divine, further from an experience of open-hearted unity. It can be incredibly challenging to be our best spiritual self in certain circumstances that we find ourselves in entrepreneurship. And of course, Jesus talks about this ad nauseum. He says, no man can serve two masters, and he will love one or hate the other, or hate one and love the other. No man can serve God and Mamona. And Mamona is translated into English as money, but that's a total flattening of this Aramaic concept. Mamona talks about the entire system in which we are tempted to seek our own security and provision. This whole economic sphere of wanting and grasping and planning and trying to control and trying to figure things out and making things happen and having an identity and securing it, securing up forces against entropy, going and pursuing new things, craving, resisting, all this set of worldly striving is captured in this Aramaic word of mamona. And so the balance or the dance is that you're in this world, but if you try to navigate all of this and you ultimately serve mamona, you serve the system, your heart is gripping around what you think that you need from the external world. It will crush you sometimes, and it will shrink you, and it will kick your ass and beat you down and absolutely bring you to your knees. But the highest potential of the growth that can come from this is when we can be in this world, we can be in this environment, but it can force us or humble us to the point where we realize that our own capacity separated from the divine source is not enough. We cannot sustain this. We cannot bear this. We cannot bear it psychologically. We cannot bear it physically. We cannot bear it intellectually, mentally. We literally do not have what it takes to accomplish what needs to be accomplished or overcome all that needs to be overcome alone. And so the ultimate potential is that maybe we start off serving Mamona and claiming or pretending that we're ultimately serving God or the divine or oneness as our master. And then what I experienced myself is that if this is the division of the heart, I was brought to complete surrender. I was brought to just absolutely beaten down, could not do it on my own. And only then, when I absolutely let go of leaning on my own strength, this is what caused me to just break. And through that break through into reliance and continual reliance on a source that is greater than anything I could do on my own. And so this is the potential, I think, of the challenges of entrepreneurship that really is this, I guess, almost like you need inoculated against a disease by a vaccine. You get exposed to this, your body must fight it. You have to go through this experience to break through into the potential that can come in terms of spiritual growth from this difficult undertaking that entrepreneurship can be. How do you feel about this spiritual potential for growth out of entrepreneurship, and also this two sides, this sea of temptations, and yet this great source of potential growth? You're muted.
The beautiful description you brought on, and thank you for sharing your journey and your view on it. And I want to riff on your thought. Someone who is broken is also someone who is open to find new ways of doing stuff, and also realizing that one's identity is not limited to oneself, but also you can identify with something bigger than yourself. Maybe it is a team of like-minded people pursuing one goal with highly coherent vectors of trying to apply the force of your energy and your creativity towards an outcome which ultimately serves you, your team, and society as well, to make the world a tiny bit better through a better solution, service, or product that you can offer with your team. So it is also this aspect of unity that which you will experience, because nobody can do everything alone. Even if you're a solo founder in the modern age of AI, you need the people who maintain these systems, who build these systems, so that you can stand on the shoulders of giants. And the ultimate realization is that we are within this web of interconnections of people offering their unique gifts to the world and to the people who can use these gifts as their input to produce some greater output. And so you will realize that you are not alone on this world, and you cannot do everything alone, so that you need also the input of other people's perspectives to eliminate your blind spots, not fully, but that you won't walk into that you won't walk over the cliff just because you don't look down. But if you have a team of people who see things differently, the world will appear in color instead of your own perspective in black and white. And you will only realize that if you have conversations with people who are thinking through these challenges, who are experienced people who already walked the walk and not only talked. Therefore, this is part of an identity which, when confronted with the real world, when hit by reality, which produces a lot of psychological pain as well. But only then you realize psychological pain feels real, but you can detach from yourself and from your identity. And in that process, you also detach from that pain and gain a higher perspective from that. Like the bird's eye view on your problems, you will see when you rest a little, when you meditate, when you pull in new perspectives, when you pull in new ideas how to tackle this upcoming challenge or this unexpected thing that you have to deal with. So in that way, what Brunson means, I believe, is that this spiritual path also means gaining the scar tissue to prove that you can now circumnavigate the world of different challenges which can be presented to you if you try to do and venture out and take ownership, put your name out there, take risks on your own name. And then, yeah, failing is part of that journey as well. And it hurts. And then dealing with the pain in better ways, dealing with the pain together with people who already know how it feels like and who already have ways to deal with it healthily. How would you describe your best approaches of dealing with these kinds of psychological pains in a healthy way?
Great question. There's a lot of ways that psychological pain comes in the entrepreneurship journey. And I think one thing that it teaches you is all of the ways that your own mindsets are upstream of the pain that you experience, and to become more and more sensitive to the moments of cause that lead to a delayed moment of effect. It can increase your awareness of the ways that you are a causal element of the vicious psychological cycles and energetic cycles that you get yourself involved in or that you become involved in, and to learn to claim more and more responsibility and ownership of the circumstances that you become a part in. And so at first you may be tempted to, so let's say you need to hire somebody, you go out and interview a bunch of people, and when you interview somebody, the story is right, you really want them, you have this desire, and they're telling you all the right things, but your gut tells you the small voice that doesn't talk with words is a little bit like, I don't know about this guy. And you feel this intuitive, you feel the brakes coming on from your body, but your body and your intuition doesn't make an argument. It picks up on subtle body language. It picks up on a feel. It picks up on an intuition. And so inevitably, early on in the entrepreneurship journey, you're going to ignore what your heart tells you, what your gut tells you. And your brain is going to be like, oh, we need this guy. We need to do this thing. We can fulfill this role. I don't want to do this part of it anymore. Or we need more people doing this thing. And so you listen to your brain over your heart and you hire this person. And then what happens, your gut was right. It almost always, when these two things disagree, this one ends up being right in the long run, even though this one makes the better argument and is the argument that you're tempted to listen to. And so time comes, you're completely frustrated and it goes terrible and you lose a bunch of resources, you've invested a bunch of time that was a waste, it harms your company's culture, and you're in a much worse place than if you never even acted in the first place. And it's insult on top of injury, it affects your energy and it affects your finances and it affects your probabilities of the things that you fear of failure or whatever coming true have increased, and it's all bad all at once. It's insult on top of injury. You're worse off than when you started this morning after you endured a horrible day. And so this teaches you a few things. One is that it teaches you over and over again to, one is that, oh man, I've got to learn to listen to this source more. This is a part, like I did have something to do with this circumstance that feels very unfair to me, that I've been wronged by this person, and I've got to follow my inner GPS when it speaks. And so this is something we've got to learn, at least speaking of myself, I had to learn this the hard way 100 times before I got decent at listening to my intuition. The other thing, though, is you experience weeks at a time where it's all bad and it's all getting worse all at once, despite all that you're doing to try to make it better. There were weeks when I worked literally over a month without taking even a Sunday off, and it was getting way worse. And I was losing money at the same time that I was just suffering immensely. And like I was in it, and all the things that I feared were getting larger and more probable. And so you have insult on top of injury, on top of tomorrow looks like it will be worse than if today never happened. Even though I suffered all day to try to fix things and make things better, they got even worse. And I'm besieged on all sides. And if I'm being completely honest, I have to admit that certain errors in judgment that I made have led to this circumstance that I'm now in. It's this perfect storm, and it looks like tomorrow is going to be even worse, is the circumstance you find yourself in. And in this, you learn perseverance and endurance, as well as this greater faith that, okay, I don't know where things are going to go. Tomorrow does look like it's worse than today. The things that I fear are looking larger and more probable today than yesterday. And all of my suffering into today didn't seem to actually make things better. Things are worse than they were before, and they're looking like they're getting even worse. The momentum is bad. I'm all discouraged. Nothing seems good about this. And it just feels like I'm getting my butt kicked in insult, injury, and suffering, and no end in sight. And this forces you to learn whatever coping mechanisms are needed to come to a bigger perspective on all this. And so one that I found, this was a real simple, it's not that creative because I wasn't in a state of mind that was that creative, but there was a year where I had like most of my weeks were like this. I was all alone and I was besieged on all sides. I had all these people that were kind of adversarial in my environment, and my environment was really, really negative, and the big picture and everything that I feared was negative and getting worse all at once. And furthermore, it was because I had gotten myself into this situation because I had gotten deceived about what I was committing to, and I had naively trusted people that were untrustworthy. And so I did have like this was the worst insult of it all, is that I got myself into this damn mess. And so what I relied on was I came to this estimation that, okay, I don't know how many horrible days I'm going to experience where I go all out, I suffer all day, and things got worse than they were to begin with. But it's some finite amount. It's not going to be infinite days that I experience that are this terrible. And so I was like, okay, how many will there probably be? Well, I've probably experienced like 50 days like this so far. I'm guessing I'll have to experience another 100 of these type of days until I'm completely through this mess. And one way or another, I'm on to the next phase of my life. And so I was like, okay, every day I experience where, and this is the worst part of this whole thing, is when I go out all day, I strive as hard as I can, I suffer all day, and things are worse than when I begin, and it's the most discouraging thing, and I feel completely alone and just completely losing. And at some ultimate level, even though it was through blindness or an experience or whatever, at some ultimate level, I also got myself into this, and so it's kind of my fault that I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing, and these things that I fear are looking worse. I'm going to have a finite number of days that are like this. Maybe it's 100 more. And so, and this is the hardest price that I'm paying for this. This is the worst, at least for what it feels like, what the experience is like. So if I'm putting in this is the hardest price that I'm paying. I have 100 of these days as my estimate. And even if I'm wrong, I know it's a finite amount. And so every day I experience like this, that's one fewer day that I'm going to have to be in this. And so I would make a tally with those days, and I would call them a tally day. And I reframed it in my brain where, okay, I paid 3 tallies of my 100 remaining tallies price this week. And so I can feel good about, even though it looks like I'm losing, I'm paying this price and I'm getting closer to the 100 that I owe before I get out of this thing. This almost like being in jail and making tallies on the wall was this kind of psychological experience, but it helped. It forces you to just accept where you're at and try to proceed and trust that you're going to get through it, and trust that there's a bigger picture, there's more seasons of life, and that I'm here right now. I'm going to be somewhere else later. I trust that I will sustain this, and that whatever is meant to happen will ultimately happen one way or another. And so this just surrendering to reality over and over and over is something that it forces you to do. Because when I don't surrender, I don't win the argument. Reality always wins the argument. So it shows us this relationship of we are a small piece of this big picture, and we cannot control everything, no matter how hard we try. And in surrendering, this is where we can access actually more capacity to experience what needs to be experienced, to do what needs to be done, to decide what needs to be decided, and to do what we can with what we've got, where we're at, day after day after day, and to bear what we need to bear. How do you think about these challenging phases of entrepreneurship we need to experience, the fears that we need to experience, the frustration, the failures, the pain? How do we have a wise mindset? And not necessarily just with entrepreneurship, but this will happen in our personal life too. How do you think about when we find ourselves in a very challenging, gloomy season? How do we endure and do as good as we can given where we're at?
Well, you said it rightly, accepting reality as it is, and accepting where you find yourself right now, in whichever circumstances you find yourself right now, and getting rid of all these illusions that you made yourself and that maybe led you getting into this challenging situation. So this is the first step, accepting. acceptance, and then recognizing that venturing out on your own means also a lot more volatility. It is not
Yes.
a regular pay that you get. It is like more the deals you take, the risks you take, and therefore you also have to accept that maybe your livelihood will come in lump sums instead of regular paychecks. And with that also means, can you make it through the valley of despair? Because
Yeah.
despair is inevitable and it will come. It will test your patience. You have 100 day of everyday input, and then you won't see results. Maybe you are distracted and don't have any focus. Okay, then probably you need to reevaluate your level of focus, which I actually challenged with. I need to focus so that I can build momentum. But for that, you need to make a pact with yourself and say, okay, I will try this for the next 3 months and want to see these kinds of outcomes. With these kinds of inputs, I hypothesize that I will reach it. But if I see that it won't happen, then probably I need to reevaluate and maybe don't fall for the sunken cost fallacy and just continue on a futile approach or attempt to reach these outcomes. So the higher volatility is inevitable as well. And therefore, this journey includes the highest highs as well as the lowest lows. But
Mhm.
having a good fallback system for how you could fend off the lowest lows so that they don't ruin your physical health, your mental health, your psychological well-being, or your social health. You should have like a network of people who you can call to, you can ask for support or for insights or for just having a partner to have a conversation about whatever is challenging you. I guess this is invaluable, as well as a routine of going into nature or moving your body and sleeping enough, and also having input that will support your journey in terms of your mindset. You can fine tune it with your input because you're a system of interconnected parts, and whatever you put into a system probably also shapes the outcome of the system. So you need to really filter what comes into your system, not only food, nutrition, but also the people you surround yourself with or the information you consume. If you just mindlessly consume any information which comes, you probably won't gain much momentum. But you can filter the information towards the type of outcome you want to see from yourself and put this information in. So this is an aspect of it as well. And patience, you need to have patience because you will have self-doubts. You will, in weak times, in weak moments of time, you will compare yourself to other people as well,
Yes.
who are far ahead on the journey you are on. But the secret, in my opinion, is okay, you need to compare yourself to what your potential is if you put in your best effort. And with that, you can vote for your better self, and you can cast a vote with any action you make, with every action you take and every step you take. And then you can gradually vote for the person who can produce this outcome you are looking for, you are aiming for.
Hmm.
And yeah, with these ideas, I think I also wanted to refer to your idea, which you shared, where you have the perspective, okay, this is one day of these 100 days that I can cross off the list until the outcome is more and more likely. So you switch your perspective instead of from your effort that you put in and you don't see any outcome and you hypothesize that maybe your effort is futile, to a perspective where you see this is the outcome and I think I only have 100 days left of putting in the effort and then I reach this outcome that I look for. So this perspective shift from effort to outcome makes you also more likely to do the actions necessary instead of being defeated of not seeing results from your efforts. Because this one kind of mental image always helps in these situations. At least it helps me. imagining your input and your work as the heat you put into melting an ice cube. I call it ice cube work. And you put in this heat, but you won't see that the ice cubes melt. It's maybe from, now I have European measures, -7 degrees Celsius. And you put in the work and it's like warming up to -4 degrees Celsius. Don't be discouraged from the ice cube not melting yet. You put in the latent work. You're investing your energy into the system. So the latent work is not wasted. You just working towards the phase shift, which comes at a certain point in time and with certain kinds of conditions. And so this is also the metaphor for changing your perspective towards outcome-based views instead of effort-based views, because then you see, I know that there will be a phase shift, a very sudden one. And I know that it takes another 3 degrees until the ice cube reaches 0 degrees Celsius. And at 1 degree Celsius, it melts. It's already molten, maybe if you take long enough time. But if you even work harder, and then it's like 20 degrees and it's like water, yeah. And then you can pursue the next goal. Maybe the next phase shift is you want to boil it and you want to put so much effort into it so that you can have a steam engine. And then you want to be even higher goals. And then you want to be the steam for the steam engine of whatever kind of metaphor you want to put into this.
I love the ice cube work. I love the ice cube work. This is beautiful. And you mentioned volatility too. And I do think this is one of the core elements that makes entrepreneurship different than some other, at least occupational paths that we might be in. There's a lot of volatility to the positive and to the negative. And the gift of this volatility, as I see it, or at least one of the gifts, is that it basically gives you a ton of feedback to feel a lot of pain when you are not applying wisdom. And by doing so, you recognize from real lived felt experience, not a theory that I read in a book out there, but really like, oh, man, this hurts because I did not apply this kind of wisdom at this particular juncture. And it might take a while for us to recognize it. For me, it took a while to recognize certain patterns. It wasn't the first time that I experienced an error that oftentimes I was able to recognize it when I needed to with clarity in the future. But after enough times repeating my own mistakes of a lack of applying wisdom, it helps you to recognize the moment of cause that will lead to certain effects that will bear certain fruits. And so what I mentioned earlier is listening to our intuition. When our thinking, logical, narrative mind disagrees with our body, pay attention. You're going to make the mistake, at least I made the mistake many times and sometimes continue to make the mistake of listening to my thoughts rather than listening to my body's wisdom. And I see the cause and effect. You experience the cause and effect and you'll regret it. And another way too is when we fall into temptations of positive emotion, which is a huge element of the entrepreneurship journey that I think is fairly somewhat unique and characteristic, is actually there's a lot of upside. There's no safety net and there's no ceiling. It's, if you do great, it's not a situation where you're going to have the same paycheck week after week after week, no matter what happens with stuff. It's going to be feast or famine. And so in the feast, that's actually where a lot of our biggest temptations exist, because this is where we're tempted by greed on one hand, even if we don't want to admit what it is, over if we attach our heart to things that we want in the external world, things that we want to happen, things that we become attached to happening in the future that we don't have yet, we will let our minds become consumed in one way or another by what we crave that we do not yet have, or what we believe that we need. And in this greed, we will notice that, one, we experience a lack along the way. It tempts us and it tastes sweet in a way, but it actually brings us further from the source, and it weakens us, and it makes us less able to act spontaneously because we have this attachment that we're always trying to keep in our mind. And it makes us ulterior in certain circumstances, or rigid in certain circumstances, because we're afraid to let go of this possibility that we've already decided that we need. And then the other one is pride. And pride is a really big temptation on this path, because you're leading people. You need to have some confidence to inspire your team or to sell things through to other people. It wraps around, there's a bunch of people looking back at you. There's all these almost like fingers pointed back at this self-image that you think you have this whole time, and you'll make certain good moves that you feel really good about, or you'll notice certain successes, and there's an enormous, and people will say things to you that our egos will want to cling on to and want to hold on to, and just really let me secure that and grab onto it and tuck it in my pocket and make that a part of my identity. This is really tempting for some of us. And the temptation of being a great leader, the temptation of being really smart and good at making decisions, the temptation of all of these things that we want to label ourselves at, or have a narrative of ourselves at, or make a black and white plain statement of truth about, that glosses over the both sides of this. That sometimes I make good decisions, sometimes I make bad decisions. Sometimes I'm really good at leadership, sometimes I fall short of what I'm capable of being. This nuanced view of reality. We want to have a black and white, I am a great leader, I am so smart, I am really good at XYZ, I am a fantastic entrepreneur. These identities become, once again, attachments that make us unable to access the flow, unable to access wisdom. And when we get in this pride, it leads us into hell. And this is an empirical claim I'm making. Pay attention. When you make the choice to indulge this, not outside, you don't have to say anything prideful. And a lot of times this retreats to just being mindsets in your mind, comparing yourselves to others and wanting to feel superior to others, telling yourself a story about how smart you are, telling yourself a story about how successful you are. All of these things greatly weaken us, and they make us incredibly fragile. And then ultimately, we will find ourselves in psychological hell if we allow ourselves to become too consumed by pride. And this pride and greed that lead us down this path that leads to weeping and gnashing of teeth. These things are very delicious on first taste, and they almost feel like they are just the satisfying cover up that we need to cover up some of the other emotions of perhaps fear that we have. If you have fear, you're going to really want to cover it up with pride or greed or anger commonly. And same with many of these negative emotions. This can feel like a relief at first, and a delicious relief to indulge these. But entrepreneurship will make you experience these consequences over and over and over. And so hopefully, in the pain that you experience from our own psychological or spiritual errors, we can gain more wisdom of the cause and effect. The next time I'm tempted to indulge this prideful mindset, I can recognize that, ooh, I don't want to follow that. I know where that leads. I've experienced 100 times where that leads. I've gone down that path so many times, and I know exactly this stage on the path and where I'm going next and where I'm going next. And over time, we can wake up to this and have some lucidity about the cause and effect of our own mindsets and psychological temptations. The other element of this, paying the consequences, feeling the volatility of our own, or feeling the pain when we fail to apply the wisdom that we already have within us, is this hard conversations, easy life, easy conversations, hard life. For me, with my own personality, I love to, I'm a very positive mindset human. I'm an optimist, this and that. And and as an entrepreneur, you're outnumbered. You don't want to have to go have a hard conversation with 10 people today. It's all that energy against your energy, and it's over and over, and it's relentless. And you just want to avoid it and work on shit that's more appealing to you a lot of times. But if you avoid those conversations, the problems grow and they balloon and they multiply, because you aren't leaning into what needs to be done, what you are called to do, and leaning into the uncertainty that comes from having hard conversations. If I have a hard conversation with you, I don't know if you're going to go behind my back and do something to undermine the company. I don't know if you're going to quit. I don't know if you're going to blow up on my face. I don't know if you're going to quit and make other people quit, and then I'm not going to know what I'm going to do tomorrow, and then I'm going to lose money this month, and blah, 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 blah. We can extrapolate out the fears, because there is a lot of uncertainty in what happens when we lean into what spontaneously needs to be said. These difficult confrontations that are short term, very, very painful, but long term essential to keep the whole team aligned and healthy. And so this is something that we also have to learn the hard way over and over. When we don't follow and speak what needs to be said and speak the truth and trust that no matter what happens, I know that I'm speaking what needs to be said. And I trust that however this unfolds, even if it blows up first, that this is what is needed, that I'm listening and following wisdom and having faith in how things unfold from there. So this is another element, this overall feeling that we need to continually rely on a source that is greater than us, that is greater than any of our narratives and wants and not wants, and listen and follow in our whole body the direction that we are called to move, exactly what we are called to spontaneously speak in this moment, and not try to cling on to it, not make an identity around it, not plan tomorrow's wisdom today, but just continually rely on this daily bread from something that is wiser than us. And all of these ways that we make our own life harder and more painful are the most important lessons to enable us eventually to gain some lucidity and pattern recognition of the cause and effect in the moment of the cause before we have to repeat our own mistakes yet again. And this is, I think, one of the greatest gifts of the entrepreneurial path is these challenging lessons that it will inevitably bring. How do you think about the lessons, the growth, the learning, and maybe the ultimate perspective that can be helpful in all of this?
Well, there's a perspective which comes to mind from the book Sacred Hoops by Phil Jackson, this former basketball coach. I guess many business leaders also who read the book came to the conclusion that with teams, it is vital that you suspend your individual egos. Join in a vision which is common, which is shared, with a common respect for each other, with the courage to speak up when something needs to be said. Yeah, you need the courage to speak the truth, which you know needs to be spoken, the reality which is uncomfortable, but you know needs to be confronted. And if you have like a shared and common vision, then this spirit which forms out of it, like this identity which you then share, is much more powerful than each individual on his own. And it will be a synergy which will be created out of these pieces working together. And the outcome of the work which the individuals do together will be defining the purpose of the whole group. And then it will kind of feel like this is a bigger thing, like a bigger organism. Everybody could bring in its own strength and make the weaknesses very irrelevant. And if you manage to do that, bring up a team together, make the weaknesses irrelevant, encourage everyone to bring in his or her strength, and then focus on the common mission, then it will feel like a very spiritual way to play the game. From my experience, if there's ego from individuals involved in reaching the outcomes, probably the vectors will be misaligned and you would not reach similarly well outcome than if you would just pull on the same rope and then make it work together. So this is also part of the spiritual journey, to bring in the respect, to bring in the common vision, to bring in your own strength, and to let go of your ego, to take in other perspectives, to let go of your own blind spots, and to recognize a way which you share with people, with like-minded people who are really smart, is very much more rewarding than just trying to do everything on your own and try to call yourself a self-made man, a self-made woman. Because this journey will be a lot more lonely. We are social creatures. We long for connection. We long for something bigger than ourselves, a mission which we can bring to life. And with that, this week, my intention is also to think about how can I bring people together to focus on a common vision. In my case, the vision will be, how can we steward the new technology of artificial intelligence into society in a way which is still human-centered and designed with the perspective that the human is in center, that the technology is made for the human, that not only the businesses capture all the value which is generated by this new technology, but the value is socially responsibly shared with anyone who uses it and augments his or her own strength to produce and lever good outcomes. What is your intention and any closing thoughts, Peyton?
Well, I'll share that your mission is a very timely one right now. That is a ship that we want to steer in the right direction. I can tell you that because it's quite a ship. It's quite a ship. What I'll say about mine is I'm reminded of what I consider maybe the greatest lesson that entrepreneurship has taught me, and that is that of surrender, that of learning to abandon leaning on my own strength, to trust in the spontaneous unfolding of the universe, even if I don't get what I want, even if things don't play out how I want them to, or how I think I want them to, on whatever arbitrary time horizon I've defined it as. This complete abandonment of needing the future to play out in any way other than how reality is destined to unfold, to completely have the endurance and to walk with total openness, with a complete open palm on how I hold the way that I think events will unfold or should unfold. So, this surrender and then this proceed with faith in the spontaneous unfolding. This is my intention out of all of this, and definitely one that I need to bring myself back to over and over and over. And so, man, I love this conversation. It's cool to reflect on all of this. I am grateful for all of the lessons, all of the pain, and all of the joys of the experience, and definitely have the intention to try to hold things as wisely as I can, as wisely as my little primate is capable of doing, and accept the ways that I stumble over and over, and perhaps even predictably, and just continue to be with what is and keep moving from there. Thank you for sharing your thoughts here, my friend.
Thank you very much. And why not see it as a fun park? And onward, enjoy the entrepreneurial roller coaster, my friend.
Hell
Have a
yeah,
great
baby.
week.
Likewise. Have a great week. Great talking to you.
Great talking to you. Bye.
Bye.